precisely that's the state that it is describing, that it is actually the state we are living in Europe right now, between jihad and Reconquista. And sooner or later, there will be an explosion. People will not accept to have their liberty infringed like that by Islam people. It is impossible. I mean, something will happen. And I'm ready to lead a movement about that, if it's necessary. But I can't stand that anymore. I mean, I can't stand that. And you see, the problem is that the intellectual journalists people, I was in the media, I know it is. I had to fight for years against this kind of leftist attitude. People were not. Yeah, but my question was that.
I'm enjoying this.
No, but do you believe the possibility of a civil war in Europe in a few years? That's what my question is.
All I can say is I think I could make a lot more money in the next few years if I quit writing and go into the gun business. I know. I mean, it's it's a joke, but it's a very dark joke. I mean, it's true. I mean, we're headed in that direction. I don't see it turning around for the most part. I mean, I mentioned my friend Hege Storhaug in Norway a couple of minutes ago, and she writes stuff that she's criticized in the media constantly for exaggerating the situation, and she talked to a couple of people who are in the immigration department in Norway, and they took her aside and they said, "This is just between us. This is they don't use our names, but it's much worse even than you have said." And that's been my experience and the experience of other people who are writing about this stuff that I talk to. Every year we realize it's worse than I thought it was a year ago, and so that that's the direction it's moving. But I think it's good.
Mr. Bauer.
Yes.
Could you? I mean, it might be going in that direction, but it seems there's a lot of passivity at the same time. So people are not necessarily even rising to discuss about the issue. So is it really going in that direction? If it is, do you have some example and some facts to support it?
There's passivity on the part of the elites, the people who run our country, the countries of Europe, on the part of the media, people who mostly live in nice neighborhoods where they send their children to nice private schools and that sort of thing. But among ordinary people who, if you sit down with people in a pub and have a couple of beers, and they get to feel that they can trust you, you'll hear a lot of rage, you'll hear a lot of frustration, you'll hear a lot of anger. Now, again, at the same time, what will happen? Will they? So far, people have just gone along. They've gone along with their leaders. But I do have a feeling that at some point they are going to say that this is too much and we have to do something. But then again, by the time that point comes, it may be too late.
Well, would you believe...
I would say one thing. I think we have to hopefully be clear that we can't work with people with very liberal values, and we have to reject people like the BNP and parties like that. They actually hurt us because they actually unite Hindus and Jews and a variety and Muslims together in the fight against them, and instead of focusing us on the real issues. So they hurt our cause, and we should be careful not to ally ourselves with the BNP and other illiberal parties in Europe, etc.
I would certainly agree with that, and I would say that some of the people I know who are most in Europe, who are the most frustrated about all this, are people who are hardworking, law-abiding immigrants from other parts of the world who are non-Muslims, and some people from the Muslim world who actually thought when they came to Europe they were escaping all this horrible stuff. And some of the hardest working, And the best citizens in Norway, for example, are Vietnamese immigrants. They're great entrepreneurs. They start restaurants. I write while Europe slept, I write about this little Vietnamese restaurant I go to all the time. And how the site of the woman, it's a family-owned restaurant, and the woman who owns the restaurant was sitting one day at one of the tables with her little girl, helping her with her homework, and they were speaking Norwegian. They weren't speaking Vietnamese, they were speaking Norwegian, and the mother was speaking broken Norwegian, but the little girl of 6 or so was speaking perfect Norwegian. She sounded like a little Norwegian girl. Now that this is going to be a successfully integrated family, if there's still a Norway to be integrated into by the time that kid grows up, of course.
The reason I'm asking the question, and I want to push a little
Yeah.
in that direction, it's because when you read a little bit America Alone, Mark Stein,
Yeah.
the dynamics of demography seems to be saying that there's a passivity, and even this type of possible reaction may not even happen because of the dynamics of demography.
Yeah, well, nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I mean, the most depressing conversation you can have when you sit around with a few people who are concerned about these issues is saying, okay, where are we going to be in 10 or 20 years? And there are different opinions, and sometimes I'm more optimistic than others. Sometimes I do think, like when I'm at events like this and I see people who take these things seriously, I feel, that there is a resistance out there, and other times not so hopeful. Other times not so hopeful.
Thank you very much for enlightening us with the real problem existing, And he just mentioned about the book America Alone, and also Ayaan Hirsi Ali's Infidel.
Yes.
I think the basic thing, they ask the question, why it is happening in that particular community, and why we have not been able to answer to that particular question of there are madrasas which are training these people, and this is what we get. Is there, in Europe, perhaps you have traveled a lot and you know that there are still madrasa exist?
Yeah.
In India and Pakistan, at least I know,
Yeah.
that in India there were many madrasas, but they have been stopped, and there is a little less violence now.
Mm-hmm.
In Pakistan, if you look, the other day I was reading that there are at least 12,000 to 13,000 madrasas are there. They are the one, perhaps, what you see, the terrorism, is the byproduct of those teaching, perhaps? Do you think that? Is there a way to perhaps answer this question before it becomes too, exposed?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but I certainly know that the madrasas are a breeding ground for this extremism. As I said, the parents in Europe, Muslim parents in Europe, to a very large extent, send their children to madrasas. In Norway, the main place is Pakistan. They send them to Pakistan, and all they learn about there is the Quran and Sharia, and the whole point of sending them there is so that they will not be integrated into Western values, so that they will come back to Norway and continue, living the way their great grandparents did in some village, and thinking the way they did, and that's the purpose, and it's allowed. They're allowed to do it. The government doesn't do anything about it. They're even thinking of helping subsidize it. This is Europe for you. Was there?
In Muslim world or in Arabic world, wherever there are madrasas,
Yeah.
there you see that, there is always a problem.
Oh, yes.
But where there are not,
Yeah.
perhaps